Insights, solutions, and networking all come together at RSA Conference. Join a global cybersecurity community at rsaconference.com/ITSP-MAG24.
The authors acknowledge that this podcast was recorded on the traditional, unceded lands of the Lekwungen peoples. Hello, and welcome back to Stories from Space. I'm your host, Matt Williams, and today we're going to carry on with the Great Migration. In previous episodes, we looked at how humans may someday live on the Moon, on Mars, on Mercury, and Venus, giving rise to new segments of the human population known as Martians, Cytherians, and Hermians. We then looked at how human settlement may one day spread to the asteroid belt and beyond to Jupiter's largest moons, the Jovians, Saturn's largest moons, the Uranians, and today we'll take a look at how humans may someday come to live on Uranus's largest moons, giving rise to a population known as Uranians. Now, this is a serious topic, people, so get your giggles out now. All good? Okay, let's begin. The first thing you need to know about Uranus and Neptune are that they fall into a separate class of gas giants, often known as ice giants. The reason for this is that in addition to hydrogen and helium, which make up the majority of their atmospheres, just like Jupiter and Saturn, Uranus and Neptune also contain abundant volatile elements like water, ammonia, methane, and various hydrocarbons. The presence of methane in particular is what gives these planets their characteristic blue color. And based on planetary modeling, scientists believe that the structure of ice giants is differentiated between a gaseous outer envelope, an icy mantle in the middle, and a rocky metallic core. The term ice refers to volatile elements in the interior being compressed to the point where they become solid. So while there is solid water, methane, and ammonia within the interiors of these planets, it's due to pressure rather than low temperatures. And in keeping with the planetary nomenclature, Uranus is named after the ancient Greek god Uranus, the primordial god of the sky in the Greek pantheon, who mated with Gaia, the primordial earth goddess, to produce the Titans. Given that the neighboring planet Saturn was named after Kronos, the chief of the Titans who overthrew Uranus to produce the Olympian gods, and given that Uranus orbits beyond Saturn, tradition dictated that it be named after Kronos' predecessor. And while Uranus is sometimes visible to the naked eye, it was traditionally thought to be a star and not recognized as a planet until the 18th century. Its largest moons began to be observed shortly thereafter. These include Titania, Oberon, Ariel, Umbriel, and Miranda. Instead of being named after figures from Greek mythology, the moons were named after characters from Shakespearean plays and the works of Alexander Pope. This tradition has continued well into the 20th century as more moons and moonlets were discovered. So, for Oberon, Titania, and Puck, the names are all derived from fairies and sprites from William Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream. Umbriel and Belinda are derived from characters from Alexander Pope's The Rape of the Lock, and Miranda and several retrograde moons are named after characters in Shakespeare's The Tempest. Other names include Mab and Margaret, whose names are taken from Romeo and Juliet and Much Ado About Nothing. And like the majority of satellites in the outer solar system, the Uranian satellites are believed to be composed of roughly equal parts water, ice, and rocky material, which are differentiated between icy surfaces, rocky interiors, metallic cores, and for many, there's the potential of there being a liquid water ocean between the core and mantle boundary. This is certainly true of Titania and Oberon, but in the case of these moons, it's not so much tidal heating that leads to the creation of the oceans, as much as the presence of ammonia and other volatile compounds that have a very low melting point, and, correspondingly, a very low freezing point. And these are typically referred to in this context as antifreeze. In addition, because of their lower density, which is directly attributable to water, ice, and volatiles making up a large percentage of their composition, the surface gravity of Uranus's largest moons is very low, ranges from around 3.7% for Titania and 0.8% for Miranda. So when it comes to the potential for these interior oceans to host life, which of course is a going concern wherever ocean worlds exist, there is some doubt that any of the Uranian moons could in fact host life or be habitable in their interiors. In addition, the low gravity also means that options for settlement are a bit limited, at least on the surface of these moons. However, this can be remedied, as with other locations in the solar system where the gravity is particularly low, by creating pinwheel stations, also known as von Braun wheels, or Stanford toruses, and O'Neill cylinders in space. And these stations would provide simulated gravity. This way, people would be able to live on the surfaces of some of the larger moons and conduct various economic activities, such as mining the ice, mining for volatiles, and providing for space tourism, and of course, very lucrative scientific research, which could include the study of microorganisms or more complex life forms, should they actually exist, within the interior oceans. And this could give rise to sizable settlements, and people would simply need to retire to the rotating stations periodically for gravity therapy. If they're spun up to the right degree, they can provide the sensation of Earth normal gravity, and this would also be, as in other cases, advisable for pregnant nursing women or medical patients who are recovering from injury or ailments that benefit from the presence of Earth normal gravity. These stations would also serve as an important waypoint for ships coming to and from the outer solar system. So if, in fact, an economy was to be built up in the Uranians, and quite possibly beyond that, over to Neptune and the trans-Neptunian region, the large station, which can rotate to provide simulated gravity and see to all the needs of residents and visiting patrons, and can provide access to Neptune and its system of moons, would be very desirable. And in keeping with the nomenclature, this station could be named Sky Station or something else that alludes to the primordial god Uranus or his counterparts from other pantheons. Just a few examples, but Aditi, which from the Hindu tradition was the celestial mother of the gods. You've got Asman from ancient Iran, or Ahura Mazda, or Mazd, which was the sky father in the ancient Iranian and Zoroastrian traditions. Phaya Ten from Thailand, which is the personification of the sky. Or, again, from the Greco-Roman traditions, Aether or Aurora, which were associated with the atmosphere and the dawn. And given that Uranus has beautiful aurorae, which have been monitored by, and given that our telescopes have detected rather impressive aurorae in Uranus's atmosphere, this would seem highly appropriate. You've also got Amun and Ra from ancient Egypt, which were, of course, merged to create Amun-Ra. Now, Amun was the god of creation and the wind, and Ra was the god of the sun. So once they were merged together, you had Amun-Ra, the sky god, also a fitting name. In East Africa, there are several, and in East Africa, you've got Wak, or Waka, which is the name of the sky and creator god for many people who are part of the Kushite language family. So that includes Somalia, Ethiopia, Eritrea. Kunvum, the supreme creator god and sky father among the Mbuti people of the Congo region, or the Celtic Nuada, god of the sky, wind, and war. Although, if you really want to get primordial, the name Dieus literally translates to daylight sky god and is a reconstructed name from the Proto-Indo-European mythology, which inspired many of these traditions, ranging from Europe to Central Asia, India, and Iran, all of which are good choices. And since several stations would probably be considered optimal, you'd have no shortage of possible names to use. Another thing that these stations and settlements on the surface would facilitate is harvesting resources directly from Uranus's atmosphere. This would, of course, include methane and hydrogen and helium, all of which would be a boon for various industries, not the least of which would be terraforming. Mars, in order to be brought up to Earth-like temperatures, would need a lot of greenhouse gases, of which methane is a super greenhouse gas, and of course ammonia, which would be used for the same purpose. And hydrogen and helium would further fuel the fusion economy. But as fans of planetary science may already know, Uranus is believed to have diamond rains inside of its atmosphere. So essentially, carbon molecules are compressed to the point where they become diamonds, and atmospheric circulation allows them to be thrown around like rain droplets, or giant hailstones would be the more accurate description. Now, while it's likely that humanity at this point in the future, if we're speculating about when and how they may settle into the outer solar system, they are likely to be able to synthesize diamonds rather easily from just compressing carbon, but being able to harvest diamonds directly from Uranus's atmosphere and other gas giants in the outer solar system, well, at the very least, that would be a luxury item. Genuine diamonds produced by incredible pressure and atmospheric processes. Plus, they would also be a cheap form of diamond that could definitely give synthetic diamonds a run for their money, and would likely be used in the creation of space stations, not the least of which would be for the purpose of creating large panoramic windows that can withstand terrible pressure differentials and high-speed impacts without breaking and causing explosive decompression. Also, locally harvested hydrogen and helium is going to be especially important for settlements in the outer solar system, given that solar energy is far, far less in terms of what you can absorb and convert into electricity using solar panels. It's far, far less in the outer solar system, to the point where it's not considered a viable means of providing any kind of power. Certainly not to massive space stations or large-scale settlements on the surface of Uranus's moons. And as I noted earlier, the gravity on these moons is quite low, to the point of being microgravity-like, so almost as if you were standing in free space rather than on the surface of a body. In addition to rotating space stations that simulate gravity, that can provide gravity therapy periodically, there's also the benefits that microgravity can have for the assembly of advanced materials, of biotechnology, of pharmaceuticals, and for manufacturing in general. In fact, microgravity and in-space assembly and construction, this is something that is being closely looked at by various space venture firms. When the commercialization of low Earth orbit becomes a reality, this is precisely one of the industries that they hope to see proliferate. There's even research being done right now on how to send payloads to space so that they can benefit from the microgravity there, not the least of which, as I said, is pharmaceuticals and bioresearch. Cell cultures and various organic compounds, they tend to grow better and proliferate in microgravity. So this is something that Uranus's moons could certainly facilitate. And certainly the creation of settlements on these moons, it would offer endless opportunities for all kinds of recreation and space tourism. People venturing to the outer solar system could stay in hotels on Miranda, Umbriel, Oberon, and Ariel and Miranda. People destined for the solar system could stay on one of the moons in considerable comfort there with low gravity, and then take shuttles out to Uranus there to dip into the atmosphere, go to the poles and witness just constant daylight, and also visit Uranus's outer rings. Because as fans of planetary science are no doubt aware, Uranus, Neptune, all the other gas giants, aside from Saturn, also have ring systems.
And these too would be a great deal of fun to navigate when done safely and under supervision, of course, and also for scientific research. And that is perhaps one of the best attractions of establishing outposts in the outer solar system is the way that they would facilitate exploration in the region, which has been very, very scant so far in our history. Reaching the outer solar system is challenging and time-consuming, and only a handful of missions have been out there to date. In fact, Uranus and Neptune, they've been explored only by the Voyager 2 spacecraft, which conducted a flyby of the two planets and their moons and their rings in 1986 on its way to the edge of the solar system. And New Horizons buzzed through this same area as well, but its ultimate destination was Pluto, and the pictures, as we no doubt all remember, and the pictures and data it acquired were absolutely amazing. So imagine, if you will, that we could launch countless spacecraft from bases located in the outer solar system. They could return all kinds of wonderful, beautiful, stunning pictures and data on all the bodies in the area. They could narrow the search for Planet 9 or Planet X, assuming it is in fact a planet and assuming that such an object is there to be found. And they could also reveal a great deal about the gas giants or the ice giants of the outer solar system, how they formed, how they evolved, what the atmospheric dynamics are there, and this could reveal tremendous amounts of some incredible insight into the formation and evolution of our solar system as a whole. And last but certainly not least, and I saved this one for the end, and last but certainly not least, there's the prospect of how bases and settlements in the Uranus system would facilitate further expansion and further exploration and settlement to the trans-Neptunian region. So this would, of course, include Neptune and its largest moon, Triton, possibly some of the smaller ones, and then Pluto, Charon, and the Kuiper Belt, where we could then hop, skip, and a jump and establish settlements on all the minor planets in the outer solar system. Of course, that's a subject for the final installment in the series, which will look at the trans-Neptunian region, including all the bodies just mentioned. And of course, one thing that I neglected to mention so far is the advanced propulsion that would be needed. As noted in previous installments, if we are going to attempt to conduct trade and build an economy in the outer solar system, and of course ferry people back and forth, as well as manufacture good resources, transit times need to be drastically cut down. And beyond Jupiter and Saturn, where nuclear thermal and nuclear electric propulsion are absolutely a must, by the time we get to the outer solar system with Uranus and Neptune, we're talking about nuclear fusion thrusters. So instead of nuclear thermal or nuclear electric propulsion systems that rely on a reactor to heat propellant, which is then used to generate thrust, or to generate electricity for an ion engine, fusion propulsion would involve pellets of deuterium, heavy hydrogen, being fused to the point, being compressed and fused, most likely by lasers in a reaction chamber, to the point where they achieve nuclear fusion and the resulting energy is released to generate propulsion. And if realized, this would allow ships to go very, very fast and make the trip to the outer solar system in a reasonable amount of time. We're talking months or even weeks rather than years. So once again, having lots of hydrogen and helium on hand would ensure that there is enough fuel for nuclear reactors in the outer solar system and also nuclear propulsion systems. And as with all the previously explored destinations that human beings could settle in our solar system, the ultimate aim here is growth. Scientific growth, intellectual growth, socio-political and economic growth, and yes, population growth. But it's not so much a desire to add numbers to the census rolls as it is to have a resource base and enough space that we will be able to say we are now in a post-scarcity era, with all the benefits that this implies. The challenge of settling out among the planets, among the many moons of the solar system, There's also the huge opportunity there to develop all the systems and methods we need in order to live sustainably with our resource base and our environment. One might think having all these resources is just going to encourage us to be wasteful, but in fact, living in space, living on extraterrestrial bodies, there's no margin for error when we do this, and everything needs to be closed loop and recyclable and reusable, at least to the absolute limits of human ingenuity and technological capability. And so, in fact, it'll actually encourage us very much to do more with less and not take risks by being wasteful. At least that's the hope and the prospect and the ultimate goal. But as Arthur C. Clarke would say, the truth will be stranger than fiction. And it remains to be seen if humanity will attempt to accomplish this someday and what the ultimate outcome will be. But where we are today, we have a pretty good idea of what it will take and what's likely to come of it, at least in the grand scheme of things, at least in terms of the... And that wraps up our look at how human beings may someday settle among Uranus's largest moons and within the system itself. I hope it was informative and only inspired a few cheap laughs. Tune in next time where we will be discussing the last installment in the series, how human beings may someday live in the trans-Neptunian region or the outer solar system. In the meantime, thank you for listening. I'm Matt Williams, and this has been Stories from Space.
Insights, solutions, and networking all come together at RSA Conference. Join a global cybersecurity community at rsaconference.com/ITSP Mag 24.